Tim Hague Reads Books, presented by Tim Hague. Iain Banks is one of the most successful and productive British novelists of his generation, a writer of apparently boundless invention and self-confidence. Since 1984, with the publication of The Wasp Factory, he has reached a huge and devoted audience with his mainstream books and his series of science fiction novels. Tim met Iain Banks in a hotel room in central London and set about the job of asking him about his writing, his career, and in particular his new novel, Transition. Although before that, he felt obliged to check that Iain was happy to be Scottish.
This is Tim Hague Reads Books, and the book I've been reading now is Transition by the Scottish writer Iain Banks. Do you mind being the Scottish writer, or are you perfectly happy with that?
I'm perfectly fine. I'm Scottish, so it would be rather bizarre, to be dissatisfied or unhappy being called Scottish, yeah.
It would be, although sort of what I'm getting at there is that you're not actually an English writer at all. If you think about what's sort of mainstream in quality English writing, I mean, you'll never find Iain Banks constructing a novel on some sort of minor misunderstanding on Chesil Beach that then has huge ramifications. You want to go for the big robust effects. You want to do the big stuff, the fairly lurid and involved plotting, and that's really not sort of it's not quality English writing, is it? It's more transatlantic, right, in a way. It's Margaret Atwood, it's Thomas Pynchon, but it's not your Ian McEwan's.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I mean, I think it's partly a kind of legacy of being a science fiction reader for so long, and it being my sort of genre of choice, as it were. And then being a science fiction writer, I think it gives you a certain set of attitudes about what's possible and what can be done, and what you're prepared to be satisfied with, in a sense. And I enjoy sort of novels and short stories that are written from sort of almost miniaturized point of view, in a sense. It's that stuff that's quite sort of closely focused on individuals and character and so on, but it's not really what I want to write particularly. I don't mind having. I'm prepared to admit that I do have to have characters in my novels, but they're not really the most important aspect of it. I think plot and story and ideas tend to be more what I'm focused on, and characters can have to sort of find their ecological niches within the stories, which to me, sounds like the way life really works, but it doesn't mean that I don't tend to write that sort of very closely focused characters or driven sort of novel.
Oh, actually, no, you do sometimes.
Do I? Oh, good.
Because you have different manners of writing. I was going to bring this up. You have the sort of the novels that take place very much in this world, The Crow Roads and The Wasp Factory, the first one, and the last one, the Steep Approach to Garbanhill. These are very much in a recognisable world that we're familiar with, and which are very character-driven.
It depends. I would still say that I know the way they're constructed, and they don't come from the characters. The characters are more like emergent phenomena, as it were, from the story. And it's always the story that comes first, and the characters. Good if it looks like the characters are there first, in a sense. But I know what you mean. Yeah, and obviously they're very much about. I think families. That probably is more to the point. It's really about families. I guess the families as a whole are probably more important than the characters individually, certainly from my point of view. But in the end, it's how it reads. It's what people think when they read it that really matters, not what my particular take on it is. I know what I was trying to do, but what a writer's trying to do and what a writer actually ends up doing can often be quite different things, and it's only the one that you end up doing that other people are able to appreciate, and that is what it's all about.
Well, of course, families are a power structure, and actually power is what gets you going, isn't it? You're very comfortable in a sort of a shadowy power structure situation where people are having to operate with limited information, with not enough information. Almost all of your novels depend upon that, some characters not knowing what's going on and having to find out, having a pressing need to find out. But power structures get you going. They get your juices going, don't they?
Now you mentioned it, yeah. Seriously, I haven't really thought of it that way, but yes, you're right. I wonder why. I've never really put myself in that. I wouldn't have thought myself that kind of writer almost. But, it's not something I'm kind of alone. I'm not a team player. I'm an only child, for one thing. I think that sort of marks you out for life, for one thing. But I don't particularly thrive in an office environment, or I don't really regard myself. I was never interested in or good at sort of office politics or any of that sort of stuff. I do think of myself very much as a sort of one-man band in that sense, with a good set of moral values, but nevertheless, I'm not really used to that sort of environment. So the fact that it does seem to, because you're right, now I think about it, it does seem to figure in pretty much all the novels. That's sort of fascination with power and the intricacies of being involved in an organisation, having limited knowledge, and I'm trying to work out who knows what and what you're allowed to know and what you can find out. So that's good point. I honestly can't take it any further than that. But that seemed to fascinate
we probably
me.
can actually, because
why.
we can come back to that within the context of this book, Transition, and I've suggested that there's a certain kind of Iain Banks novel. There's also the explicitly hard science fiction ones that you write under the name of Iain M. Banks, which are, I was going to say, mostly concerned with the culture. This
mostly,
sort of pan universal culture. But this one fits into another strain of Iain Banks writing. Can you tell me where this one sits?
It sits in the same place that The Bridge sat. The Bridge being the third novel, What I Wrote, many years ago now. And still, I think, just about my favourite of all the novels.
Is it? That's the one you like the best?
Yeah. I mean, it might change now with this one. I mean, I have a great abiding affection for The Wasp Factory, but that's because it was a book that changed my life.
It wasn't a bad book as well,
Oh, it's all right. It's hard for me to separate all these different, feelings about it. And I think probably Use of Weapons is the best of the overtly science fiction novels. And I still have I really love Song of Stone. I think in some ways it's kind of close to being the second best, but
because that one very much built its own world very convincingly, very persuasively, and despite having its own world, was so tight, was so constricted and constrained.
Well, yeah, it was. In a sense, it was
tension.
more about characters in a way, but it's still characters trapped in a warlike situation and everything. It's very constrained locale, the castle itself. But I mean, it was kind of a fairly straight narrative and slightly non-realistic. It was vaguely North European. It was vaguely latter half of the 20th century, But so not science fiction, but obviously not easily placeable in terms of our own actual history.
But that is one of the things that you do is to construct a reality that has relation to the world that we know, but which is slightly different. Or, in the case of Transition, construct lots of realities.
Why stop with one? Quite.
Why?
Well, the thing is, I really was wanting to do something a bit different. I mean, the previous, several novels, but certainly the last couple of novels, have been fairly sort of straight and conventional and sort of linear, and certainly in the case of Steep Approach to Garberdale, the original plan had been for something much more complicated and much more layered. But the way these things work, the way it works with me anyway, is that sometimes, you always have to have a lot of scaffolding around this edifice, this thing that you're building, and the scaffolding absolutely has to be there to make the building. You can't do without it. But when you finish the building, there's no point leaving the scaffolding there. Now, I've read books, and occasionally I've written. Books. I've left bits of the scaffolding showing. I've forgotten to take it down because you think it's not as simple. It's not as simple as if it's a metal pole scaffolding. If it's concrete, it's building. It's a bit more complicated than that, and they merge into each other. But I think with Garberdale, what I thought was building turned out to be scaffolding. So I ended up taking a lot away, stripping a lot of extra stuff out. So I ended up with a very straight, conventional kind of narrative, which wasn't really what it was meant to be, at the beginning. I didn't surprise myself in the writing when I was actually, tapping the keyboard, but it was quite a long way into the planning process before I realised that what I thought was going to be sort of complex, multi-layered, and quite hard to work out was actually a fairly straight, conventional family novel. So a lot of stuff.
There were some twists, but it was.
Oh yeah,
I'm not sure it was conventional, but what it was is mainstream.
By my standards,
by your standards, by your standards.
But I mean, and emblematic of that is the fact that the first line of Garberdale originally was apparently I'm an unreliable narrator. Which was taken out and has now been used in
reused, thrift
to much better effect, I might say.
Yes, because that is what. Well, no, actually, you say it's the first line. There's a preamble where it says this is based on a false story, which made me laugh. I like that.
Well, it's just it's one of those things. Where it says the names of the innocent have been changed to names of some people have been changed to protect the innocent. Someone once said the names of the guilty have been changed. I just like the idea, based on a true story. Well, yeah, no, what a surprise. I just thought sometimes someone's got to use based on a false story. So
you did.
I thought this was the kind of bit I could get away with it. But it was the bridge formed a template in a sense. It was, and going right back, the Wasp Factory was a pretty straight, again, conventional sort of novel, and quite sort of violent one and unpleasant in a lot of places, but a very conventional narrative. Straight. It had flashbacks, but they were clearly signalled, etc. And told entirely from one person's point of view, basically.
Whereas this one very much has different voices. You've made a point of using different voices. Some of whom it's clearly going to be the case. Some of whom are going to turn out to be the same person by the end of the book. Yeah. And I had great fun trying to figure out. I had one point. I was about 60 pages in. I thought they're all going to turn out to be the same person. It's all going to be one person in a sort of a quantum repetition coming back through reality in several different guises. And I don't think I'll spoil it for anybody if I tell that turned out not to be true. Well, it wasn't a bad idea. You had me going there for a minute. So why have we got these voices? Tell me about transition. Tell me about the situation, the world in which these characters, these voices, exist.
Well, the idea was simply that I liked the idea of using the idea of the multiverse or the many worlds sort of theory, and using and somehow being able to sort of flip between. I mean, in a sense, it's. We're kind of used to this. Doctor Who's done it, and Quantum Leap's done it, and some equivalents thereof, as it were. Even the Time Tunnel, if you remember that, going way back. I just like the idea of being able to use that and finding a way of using it that would kind of I felt I could justify to myself, and therefore to readers, whatever. And trying to imagine what they would actually be interested in, what could be. Still at risk or still up for grabs in it.
We have an organisation then which has operatives who can, well, the technical term is transition from one reality to another. You used the word flit just now, and that's the term they use, the sort of slang term they use for doing it. Why? What is the purpose of this for the organisation?
Well, to the extent it simply becomes about power, and in a sense that is one of the things that the book is about, is saying that anyone who's got power tends to try to protect it and enlarge it, and again it becomes about politics in a sense. And so there's quite a feeling that although it starts out from a very benign sort of point of view, this thing called the concern or l'expedience, however you want to call it.
I like that it was internationalist.
Oh yeah, it kind of has to be. You couldn't not. You couldn't make it just British or try with Atlantic or something.
James Bond,
well, kinda. So it had to put an international sort of feel to it, certainly. So I'm just the idea that no matter how sort of benign you try to start out, as long as you're involved with especially sort of secretive kind of politics, you will end up simply trying to expand your power base and protecting that, and end up sort of morally compromised. I mean, there is another final sort of it turns out really to be about why is nobody here, that thing, but this question has been asked about where are all the space aliens, and so in a sense it's really about that, but that kind of only really gets sort of brought in towards the end in a way, and there are hints of it right from the start, right from the prologue, there's something like that going on, but it turns out that's what's really all behind it. But,
well, if that's what's really all behind it, of course we are necessarily dependent on the voices. You've got an unreliable relator. He says, "I'm an unreliable relator."
Narrator, yeah.
I'm an unreliable narrator. So, and we have other voices who are subject to the power struggles. So, I dare say that you, Iain, knows what the ultimate power is and what the ultimate purpose is. But in a way, we're never going to know that for sure as a reader, because you're going to have to help me with the pronunciation. Is he Temujin?
Temujin, I think it is. Yeah, it is a proper Mongolian word. I think
he's our sort of principal.
What's the name? Well, in fact, I think it was Genghis Khan's first name.
Okay, I've learned something.
Wait, I mean, anyway, someone, it's like that.
So he is he's not quite a cat's paw, but he is subject to the machinations of his superiors, and to a large extent, the question of the book is which way does he go? Does he go with what appears to be the establishment, the Madame d'Ortolan, Or does he go with Mrs. Mulverhill? I loved Mrs. Mulverhill. I loved her being called Mrs. Mulverhill.
I know, yeah.
Somehow being Mrs. something and nothing else. Do you remember Mrs. Peel on television?
Yeah, I do.
It was always rather exciting that she was Mrs. Peel instead of Emma. And Mrs. Thatcher was always, people thought of her as Maggie, but to call somebody Mrs. something and to insist upon that is to say something.
Oh, and she does. I mean, he actually asked her right out at one point, and he says, "So is it Mr. Mulville?" She says, "No."
I just like
the name, you know.
Yes, you know.
Your point would be. You know.
So Temujin is subject to these two women, and it's women. It's both women at the top of this power struggle. Any reason for that, or did it just
not
sound
particularly?
Like a good idea?
No, I mean, in the case of Madame Doctorlan, she was going to be the character was going to be Baron Doctorlan at one point, and I remember being slightly disappointed in myself that. Because usually most of the bad people in my books are male rather than female. So, and I tried to get Grandma Winifred and Garbadale. She was meant to be quite a lot nastier, and she turned out. I actually got quite sympathetic.
Almost Aunt Ada Doom, wasn't she?
I know, yeah. But I still quite liked her at the end of towards the end of Garbadale. But she was again manipulative and could be quite cruel. And but she was doing what she thought was the right thing, for the family, as it were, even for the business, but more for the family. I felt dissatisfied that I hadn't come up with a convincing, really bad, sort of female
character. But Madame
Doctorlan's
doing what she thinks is right.
Yeah, sure. But she is more intrinsically evil.
What she thinks is right is that she should have all the power.
Absolutely, yeah. And she's a murderous nutter, basically. I was happy with that. And then Mrs. Mulvihill was just always going to be who she was, really. So there's no particular agenda as such. I'd have liked to have a decent sort of spread of sort of male and female protagonists and central characters throughout the novels. And I'm sure there's more male than female, certainly. But I like writing books.
And it gives you opportunity for sex.
It does, yes.
Manages to bed them
Mrs.
both.
Mulvihill have quite a lot of sex.
She
actually,
does.
Of course. Yeah. That is genuinely a sort of cunning plan thing going on there, because there's quite a lot of extremely sort of dry sort of interchange between them.